Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host Raghunath and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York City, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is our daily study. And I got a confession to make, Kaustubha.
Uh-oh.
May I share?
What did you do?
I killed a man. No, I'm just kidding. Imagine if I said that. No, I woke up at 3:30 today.
Is this about the snooze alarm? You hit the snooze?
No, not the snooze. Not one of my many snooze confessions captured. But I broke my makeover Monday vow of no internet. You know, it was, I tell you, this little phone.
Okay.
This is the Matrix right here. You want to know what the Matrix is? It's the World Wide Web. Ever see an animal struggling, like a fly struggling on a web? This is the web, man.
You got caught?
There was something innocent. There was like an innocent, oh, you know why? Because we have teacher training this weekend starting today. So people are coming up today. So I hit the WhatsApp button. You know, it was part of my Makeover Monday, not to look at my phone at all, but I felt like it's my duty. It's important. That was Maya sticking her foot in the door. So I checked the WhatsApp, and that led me to another WhatsApp message. And somehow or other, Facebook opened. Go figure.
Okay.
But it was, and because sometimes, you know, you do things without thinking. You open a refrigerator and you're not even hungry, or you hit an app. You ever just hit an app? You just hit an app because it's like second nature. So I hit the Facebook app, and who was on Facebook? It was Karnamrita, the person who was on our show a few weeks ago, who's suffering from cancer. So I was like, oh, Karnamrita, I got to read this. Then I got into Karnamrita, and then next thing you know, it was a slippery slope, and like a half hour of my chanting time was wasted on the phone. And I just want to fess up. I want to fess up. I'm a dented.
What will you do now?
I'm 12 Hail Marys and 14 Our Fathers. How about that?
Okay, that sounds good.
It's tough, man. You know what? That's why our Discord thread is like the spiritual matrix. You can get lost in that, but it's all sort of like, oh, here's a recipe for palak paneer. Oh, here's a question, or I'm struggling with this, or here's a new CD I've been listening to on something on Spotify. It's a different matrix. It's a spiritual matrix.
Right.
What do you think, Mara? You're very silent today.
Yeah, I'm always
Silent
quiet.
observer.
We call it Vedic Observer.
Vedic observer. We are in a great place in the Bhagavatam right now. We are on First Canto, chapter 17, text 19. What's the name of this chapter, Kaustubha? I can't see it from my...
The Punishment and Reward of Kali.
The Punishment and Reward of Kali. What's the reward?
Well, he's gonna, let's say he gets the mercy. Well, he's given places to stay, right?
Okay.
Rather than being killed. It's like, okay, you can have this, you can have that, you can have that.
It's the justice and mercy thing going on here.
Justice, little mercy.
Okay, let's dive in. Oh, we're going to do our secret
And wait,
mantras. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Narayanam namaskritya naram jaiva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Pariyeshva Badreshu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service to the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Love that line. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this is it. If you're new to this podcast, welcome aboard. Sometimes people sort of just randomly come into a podcast. Out of all the ancient texts of India, this Bhagavatam is considered the highest because it doesn't just deal with metaphysical things. I mean, Vedic culture has been a fountainhead of very interesting spiritual, metaphysical, otherworldly information for millennia. The whole world turned towards India, and out of all that stuff, it's all there. It's all there. You want to worship God? It's there. You want mysticism? It's there. You want to know information about the soul? It's there. You want to hear about UFOs? It's there. It's all there.
Slow down, Raghu.
Ghosts,
Slow down.
ghosts
This is how
are
it
there.
starts. This is how it starts.
Well, it's just good to know because some people are just wandering through as wisdom and sages. Maybe there's a UFO thing in there. It is. It's all in here. It's all in here. Supernatural. It's in there. It's a big health, wellness, cow dung. It's all in there. It's all mixed in. So anyway, out of all that stuff, connecting the spirit self to the higher power they consider the highest, that's the actual meaning of the word yoga. So by studying this, we learn all that other stuff. Actually, we learn about it. If Kaustubha lets me talk about it, then we get to talk about it more, all that other stuff. But the idea is the real joy of life is connecting the soul to our higher power and seeing this world for what it is. It's dreamlike. And when I say that, sometimes you can be like, well, if it's dreamlike, I want nothing to do with it. I'm out of here. It's dreamlike, but you're given tools with it. Listen to this one. You're given tools within the dream to extricate yourself from the dream.
Okay.
And therefore that attachment, that suffering, that pain is released. So we go through this world and we have an opportunity to love as if we're loving in the spiritual world, to live as if we're living in the spiritual. That's why you hear these statements like, in this world, but not of this world. We're in it, but we're not of it.
All right.
What do you think about that, Kaustubha?
Love it. Love it, Raghu.
So let's hear. It's one of these things. You open it up. This is wisdom literature. It's for all people, all religions, wherever you're from, even if you've never gotten into any spiritual path. This is for you, and it's going to talk to you today. It's going to talk to you.
So we got this situation here.
We've got a situation.
We got a situation where Maharaj Parikshit, who's a king, and by king we mean he's the person that's supposed to make sure justice is carried out. He's
a
the
good
protector.
king. He's a good king.
He's the one that's supposed to provide protection, supposed to provide justice. In his mystic vision, he's seeing this whole thing is playing out, where he sees Dharma is injured on the ground, and as well as Mother Earth. You know, they've taken the forms, they're personified in the forms of a bull for Dharma and a cow for the earth. They're beaten down, severely injured. And he's saying, who did this to you? He's saying to the bull, who did this to you?
Kaustubha, what would you give us a rough translation to Dharma for someone who's new to that word?
it's a big word, and of course there's different levels of, but like I would say in this context, it really has to do with just, one definition for Dharma is that which sustains. It's the ability to do what's right, or it means doing what's right, for the good, what brings about good. And so, there's so much within the wisdom literature about what is Dharma and how to practice Dharma. But what it's saying is in the age of Kali, the Kali, this darker age, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, is the one that, without qualification, posed as a qualified leader. But rather than protect, he began to hack away at Dharma and hack away at the earth.
Sure.
So in this age, Dharma is suffering and the earth is suffering. It's really interesting how, it's very timely in all this, but, this understanding of how we abuse the earth is very much connected with, or let's say it has a lot to do with our disconnection with this kind of wisdom literature, and how once you give up Dharma, the idea of I will do it right, I will do what is right, and we begin to go more towards what I'll do what's convenient, I will do what I think will bring me some kind of gain or profit or happiness.
So the rightness is connected. I like how you put that. So there is a right, but that right's connected to a greater good. It's not connected to like what feels good for me is right. Because sometimes people misplace that in the yoga community. You hear like Dharma means you got to follow your passions. No, are you kidding? Sometimes people's passions are totally screwed up. I know. Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, they're all following their passions.
Right.
You can't just follow some crazy passions. You got to follow your passions, because you said it so clearly. It's got to be directed for the overall good of humanity at large, for society, for upgrading people's lives. So it's connected. It's a hard word to translate, but that was nice.
It's broad. And so then say someone gets inspired, okay, yeah, I want that dharmic life. I want this life to be more meaningful. I want to be connected to truth. Now, what's being revealed here? Because what happens is he turns to the bull and says, who did this to you? Right? And you would expect that the bull would say, that personality of Kali right there.
He hit me.
He hit me. He broke me down. Do something about it. Right?
Yeah.
But that's not the answer that he's going to get. He's going to get a very philosophical answer. And this answer it's almost bewildering, but it's to challenge us to think deeper. And the way that I see this is that truth, if we really want to understand truth, we should be prepared to understand that it's subtle and it's nuanced. As you go to deeper levels of truth, it's more and more nuanced. And so, whereas, there's something within me that says, hey, Bull, what are you talking about? Just identify the perpetrator here, and let's take care of this, and let's see that the justice is carried out, right? And the Bhagavatam's not denying that. Maharaj Pariksit, he's the the agent of justice, and he's speaking on that level, right? I need to take care of this. Tell me who did this, and I'm going to take care of it. And so that's a valid level of thought, and a valid level of truth, and a valid level of operating in this world. But there's still more to it. And if we want to go to deeper and deeper levels of spiritual understanding, it means that one has to be able to broaden their mind and try to understand levels that aren't so apparent, aren't surface level, or really the word superficial is used here, right? Superficial means like that which is on the surface. Superficial, if I use the term superficial, I'm not denying the validity of that surface level, but there's so much more that's underneath that. So an all-encompassing understanding of truth has to have that practical, superficial level of understanding and action, but then there's a deeper level, the unseen. What is unseen that one has to contemplate more, hear about and contemplate more deeply?
Unseen supernatural forces, perhaps.
Slow down, Raghu. Slow down.
I mean, this is what we're talking about, though, right? There's many
many
reasons that things happen. It doesn't necessarily mean it's supernatural, but I'm just saying there's many unseen forces
at play
that also cause a reaction. And this is what we're going to get into.
Yeah, and so
Shall we dive into this very supernatural power?
But yeah,
chapter?
I just want to say one more thing is that it's interesting that this particular, there's the literal and the figurative going on here, but this has to do with like, why are you suffering, right? The question was placed to Dharma, why are you suffering? And this is very fundamental to human experience and the potential for spiritual growth as part of human experience, right? That very fundamental question, why are you suffering? How deep are you willing to go with this question? It's just, I'm suffering because so-and-so did something to me, right? This, what's being illustrated here is that if we really want to understand truth, we have to go deeper. It's not saying that's not part of the thing, right? That someone did something to you and therefore you're suffering, but that the thoughtful, the sage, right? The wise person wants to go deeper into it and understand that that's the surface level, that's the superficial level, because this person did that to me, I'm suffering. But why am I suffering? I have to go much deeper. And I see a smile on your face.
How deep is your love? I was waiting for it. I really need to know, 'cause we're living in this world of blue. Hold it back, Raghunath. He just said deep once. He's not going to say it again. And you're like, how deep? And I was like, oh. And he said it 4 times.
That was it. The 4th time you lost it.
He's not going to say it again.
Okay, a little Bee Gees for your Thursday morning. All right. So so in text 19, Dharma the bull begins to answer, why are you suffering? And he's saying it's a little hard for me to figure out because different philosophers approach this question in different ways. So why don't you go ahead and read text 19.
Text 19. Some of the philosophers, it's so interesting, they're having this conversation, he's totally beaten, missing legs, yet he's like becoming philosophical at this point. But this is a mystic vision.
Yes. I mean, it says that's what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur commented. So.
That's one of the great masters commented and said this is a mystic vision going on. Some of the philosophers who deny all sorts of duality declare that one's own self is responsible for his personal happiness and distress.
Okay, so that's the first one, and the word used here is ātma. The self is responsible.
Okay, what's a good example of that in the regular world?
Well, let's read the whole thing, and we can cover them all, if you don't mind.
Others say that superhuman powers are responsible.
You like that one?
Love it.
And so that's the word here. Daiva is used. Daiva can refer to God or the gods.
Nature, material nature, like the heat, the cold, which would be the gods.
Or you could say the planets. That can also refer to, like, let's say, astrological.
Saturn, Mercury in retrograde. People have been
so
saying
that daiva
forever.
can refer to all of that. Yeah, Mercury in retrograde. Yeah, it's because Mercury is in retrograde.
Because Mercury is, and that's why.
Why are you suffering? Because
eclipse.
Mercury
That's why I'm suffering. The eclipse. Remember that was your thing last month.
Thing.
There's 3. You were like, there's 3 eclipses.
I was just trying to get you through it. All right. So ātma daiva.
Ātma daiva. While yet others say that activity is responsible, your own actions.
So that's
and
karma.
Gross karma. Yeah.
Karma. That there's laws. There's a law of karma. There's a law of activity that's in play here.
And the gross materialists, I love that word, you gross. You're not just a materialist, you're a gross materialist. You're good. And the gross materialists maintain that nature is the ultimate cause.
Okay, so the word here uses svabhāvam for nature. You could have had property or something like that, I suppose, too.
It's just like,
what's that?
well, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what that means. Like,
okay, so
what
let's
does
look
that
into
mean?
it. And the idea is like this. It's like, in one sense, all of these are playing their role, right? They all, like, in the whole virtual reality that we're moving through, all of these influences are at play. And so it's not wrong to identify the role that something is playing in it. Like, for instance, like what Bhagavatam is saying is, yes, the planets do affect us, right? They do.
It's interesting, huh? The planets, it's almost hard to believe.
And once it's simple, I mean, we can see that, like, for instance, the moon's influence on the ocean. It's
On the
not hard to
waves
see.
or on
I mean, people describe it that way, right? And then you say, okay, well, the body is made up of mostly water.
salt water.
So how could the moon, shouldn't the moon also have an effect on me? So as the moon waxes and wanes, it affects me physically, it affects me biologically, it affects me emotionally. You know,
Well, there's this whole thing of the word lunatic on the full moon. It affects people's mind.
Statistically, you know, there's more crime done, you know, in different, so on. So, you know, practically, one can see that the stars, you know, a lot of people are going to deny this because it sounds too supernatural. But if you approach it, you know, objectively, you know, you can read some evidence there for sure. Right, and Bhagavatam is saying that evidence is valid, that idea is valid, that the stars, the moon, the planets, or the devas, that the gods, they allow this and they don't allow that. You know, if you got rain today, it's because there was an agent that facilitated that. You know?
All you have to do is study a little bit of Jyotish or Vedic astrology, and you will see that, oh, this isn't just, you know, the lady in the front with the bandana on her head trying to lure you in for $5 to read your palm. It's like, these are like engineers or scientists who study the planets and calculate your whole chart from the time and the longitude and the latitude and the place that you were born. And it's like, it's unbelievable how you can track karma in your own life. You could see it. If you look, I had my chart done in 1991. It was so accurate. I still refer to it. And back then I was like, oh, pretty interesting. And then I just watched one thing after another start to come true. To this day.
Very good. I believe you.
You believe me, right?
I believe you, yeah. So now let's say someone, out of all the different influences that are placed, someone was emphasizing, it's all about the gods. It's all about the planets. That's what's moving everything, and that's the cause of your suffering. It's because Mercury is in retrograde. That's the reason that you're suffering, right? But then someone else may come along and say, no, it's the law of karma. Don't you understand that fruitive activity is the root cause of distress and happiness in this world? And even if there is a superior authority, like the god of the moon, you know, or the god of the sun, you know, that have these influences on us, they are those superhuman daivic figures, those divine figures. They are all they have to work under the influence of the law of karma. So they're rewarding you or punishing you just according to the law of karma. So it's not the planets and their gods, but it's
higher than that
law.
is your own activities.
Well, there's this law that's in operation, and so it's this law it's because of karma that you're suffering. But then someone may come along and say, well, but it's the self that's responsible. You know, action is not independent. Karma is not independent because action is performed by some performer. Therefore, the performer or the ātma is the cause of their own happiness and distress. Right?
You know, but because of this, you'll see a lot of people within the Vedic culture. We call them Hindus, although it's a made-up name, Hindu. It's made up by the Greeks. They do different things to try to counteract their karma. And they'll do things like feed living entities on a Saturday, so they'll pour some water on the ground, or worship the sun on a Sunday, or do some puja to the moon on a Monday. And they get these things prescribed from their parents at birth. Maybe if you're born Indian, you can write something on the board if you have some connection with this, something you had to do. And I think we're getting there. But as bhaktas, as people practicing bhakti, we're just sort of like going right to the top here. We're going right to the worship of Lord Vishnu and understand that everything is ultimately handed to us.
That's what Bhagavatam will do. And it's going to say all of these are real agents. But the nuanced truth is that all of these are in play, but let's try to emphasize what's most important. And so it's working towards that. Now, what if we follow this logic here? 4 things were mentioned here: Daiva, the gods or the planets. And someone may say, that's the cause of my suffering. And then someone say, no, because the gods are just or the planets or the gods that are the personifications or the agents, of those planetary influences, that they just do what they're told. They just act according to the law of karma. So karma is the thing. And then someone say, well, it's not karma because it's the person that's doing the action that's playing within the field of karma. So it's the self that is the cause of it. And then someone may say svabhāvam, or nature, is the cause, and that it's just a whole big prison house that you're in. And when that whole thing disintegrates, then you're free. So it's the prison house of nature that is the cause.
Here's the interesting question.
Yeah.
Are you ready for this? Very interesting question. Because when we start getting into all this stuff, we have practical information, especially when you study your own astrology. We have practical information of certain things that are complicating our lives, certain things that are complicating our health. Sometimes we think our health is, I just got a bad liver. Sometimes there is a higher being or a lower being or a malefic force screwing up your liver. Sometimes we just have some bad luck in marriage or bad luck in love or bad luck in finances, and there's energies there. So there's different things you can do. You can wear different jewels to counteract malefic planets. You can do some pujas to worship a god or to appease some ghost. There's all these things you can do. Here's the big question, like Surya Radhika is writing on the board. I have to fast on Thursday for relationships. Here's my question.
Yes.
Because we have this insider, it's like insider trading almost, insider info. Do we try to appease those gods for health, for income, for family, for relationships? Or do we say, you know what, forget it. My life is in Krishna's hands. Sweet baby Krishna, you take care of me. That's the $1 million question here.
Well, our readings today will start to bring us in that direction. But, let's put it this way. Ultimately, what the wisest person does is they understand that ultimately it's God behind everything. And that everything that's happening to me, I understand as the mercy of God. And therefore, my one and only business is to surrender to the will of God. And when I do that, my underlying pure nature becomes fully manifests. And
How do we know that surrender to God isn't use the information God has given us to get rid of that malefic force, get rid of that ghost, to counteract that planet? God has given us tools.
Yeah, so therefore we have to first of all, we have to have that basic truth very firmly rooted in our consciousness. And with that knowledge, we might apply this or that, but we never get too caught up in it. We never get too lost in it because we always understand the deeper line truth. But let's just hold this for a second, Robert.
Okay.
The conversation's going there, and Prabhupada's going to take us there. But I just want to get through this one part first. And that is, and let's look at this again. If we say, let's use a little analogy here. If we say that daiva, or the gods or the planets, let's say like the gods in this case, are responsible. In this analogy, those gods, we could call them like they're a judge. Like, in other words, if I'm suffering, it's like I'm a prisoner, right? I'm sitting in a prison.
Right.
And the gods, or the planetary influences, they're like the judge. And karma is like the law, right? Like if I'm sitting in prison, I could say, why am I suffering here in prison? It's because of the judge.
Nice.
Right. Or I might say, well, it's because the law. Stupid laws are the reason why I'm here.
Right.
Right. Or I might say, you know what? It's the criminal's fault. It's my fault because of what I did. I'm in this. In one sense, all of these are true. They're all true. And so that's what the bull of Dharma is saying. Well, and you see historically in the history of Indian philosophy, different philosophers have emphasized different of these. They've pushed them as like, this is the reason. Okay. And so now let's continue reading. Let's hear. So Mars Prick is kind of like, hey, point me in the direction of who's the cause of your suffering, and I'm going to take care of it. And then the bull gets all philosophical about life and says different philosophers, emphasize different causes of the sufferings in life. So, and then he says, in text 20, he kind of says, let's hear what you have to say. So why don't you read text 20?
Let's hear what that philosophical bull has to say. There are also some thinkers who believe that no one can ascertain the cause of distress by argumentation, nor know it by imagination, nor express it by words. O sage amongst kings, judge for yourself by thinking over all this with your own intelligence.
Yes. So he says, he refers to him here as Rajarshi, right? It means that you're not just a Raja, you're not just the king, you're not just the agent of justice, but you're also a Rishi, right? You're also a sage, you're a deep, wise thinker. So he says, O sage amongst kings, judge for yourself. You know, you're a deep thinker. You tell me who's responsible. And so now let's read Srila Prabhupada's commentary on this. He says, and this is going to start to go to where your question was, Raghunath. Like, if there's truth in all of these, how do we focus our attention and our energy, right? What's the wisest way to move through this world? And so this is Prabhupada's commentary. He says, the Vaishnavites. It's cool that he uses that word, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't say the Vaishnavites. Those
Vaishnavites.
It means the Bhakti-yogis, those that are worshippers of Vishnu or Krishna, as opposed to so many other different philosophical schools. He says, the Vaishnavites, the devotees of the Lord, do believe, as above explained, that nothing can take place without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. And by saying, as above explained, I believe that what he's referring to there is the mention of daiva, the gods or God, right? That nothing can take place without the sanction of God. Okay. He is the Supreme Director, for he confirms in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15. You know 15:15?
Mamayavam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatanaha. That one?
No, that's 15:7.
Oh, 15:15. Oh. This is one. From me comes memory, forgetfulness.
Yeah. And you forgot.
Give me
It's God's fault.
It's not my fault. God made me forget. What is it again? Give me first word. Give me the first word.
Sarvasya.
Sarvasya chaham hridisani visto ato smriti ganam apoanam cha.
Exactly.
I can't remember the last. If I can get the first line, I'm going to call that
Sarvasya
a win.
chaham. That's good. Okay, then
Sarvasya
Sarvasya
chaham
chaham
hridisani
pradishana vishto. Matas smrita gyanam apohanam cha.
That's it.
Vedaischa sarver aham eva vedyo.
Vedanta vitkrit veda krit eva chaham.
There you go. So that the translation of that verse is, I'm seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas.
Read that again, Prabhu. That's a good verse.
I'm seated in everyone's heart.
So Krishna's telling Arjuna this. I'm seated in everyone's heart.
Yes. Sarvasya chaham hridishana vishto. I'm situated in everyone's heart. And from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Right? Like he can facilitate our understanding, or he has the power to cover that, or, somehow disconnect us from that.
If people want to forget Krishna and just live, Krishna will give you the intelligence to forget him.
Yeah.
Just like sometimes you might have a very intellectual, atheistic friend, and every time you talk about something spiritual, Isabel was just sharing something like this. Every time you talk about something spiritual, they're like, no. They get the intelligence to defeat the spiritualist from Krishna. He gives you the intelligence to forget him because he wants to fulfill your desires. Isn't that incredible?
Well, yeah. You know what? I think of it sometimes. I mean, I use this very graphic example sometimes, but sometimes the sexual examples, analogies are like, Raghunath wakes up. Say there's a young man and a young lady, and they're very attracted to each other, right?
Yes.
So there's nothing to prevent them from they're unite. Let's use the sexual euphemisms. Their union. Right?
Their union.
But let's say that there's something that they're unaware of that they suddenly become aware of. Right? Their knowledge is covered. They don't understand something. There's some truth out there that they're currently unaware of. And that truth in this case would be that they're related to each other. Let's say they're brother and sister. They didn't know, right? Now they know that. Now they have knowledge that they didn't have before. It ruins everything, right?
Yeah. Hopefully it does.
Right. So now they can't enjoy the way that they would have enjoyed because they know what they didn't know before. And so similarly, if we want to enjoy separately, because by our very nature, like a leaf to a tree, our very existence, and this is another understanding of the word dharma, our very essence, at our very essence, our very purpose for being is very much in connection to our source, to God, right? But if we decide, I want to ignore that relationship, and I want to, in a sense, usurp that relationship, and I want to be the center of all existence, which I'm not, which by design I'm not, then it's only through illusion, or you could say it's only through forgetfulness, that I can enter into that. And so therefore, when it says Krishna's like, remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness, I can grant you forgetfulness if that's what you want, right? If you want to enter into the illusion and try to experience what it is to be the center of all existence, well, that's going to require some forgetfulness. And so Krishna's like, I'm seeing your heart. I can provide that forgetfulness for you. All right. So again, let's go back to this commentary. The Vaishnava,
That example is really
yeah.
good example.
Disturbing?
It's really disturbing. Okay. Disturbing meets like very enlightening.
Okay.
I like that disturbing example. You forget that she's your sister. It's so disturbing.
Okay, so the Vaishnava.
Okay,
let's move on.
Okay,
the Vaishnavites.
You never know what's going to come out of Kaustubha's pocket, huh?
Throw that one at you. So the old incest analogy at you. Okay. The Vaishnavites, the devotees of the Lord, do believe, as above explained, that nothing can take place without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. He is the Supreme Director, for he confirms in Bhagavad Gita that he, as all-pervading paramātmā, situated in everyone's heart, stays in everyone's heart and keeps vigilance over all actions and witnesses all activities. Okay. The argument of the atheist, this is an argument against the law of karma. The argument of the atheist is that one cannot be punished for one's misdeeds unless proved by a qualified justice, is refuted herein, for we accept the perpetual witness and constant companion of the living being, the paramātmā within the heart. So if you were to say, well, the law of karma doesn't make any sense because laws need to be judged by judges. Prabhupada's saying here, that judge is the paramātmā within the heart. He goes on, a living being may forget all that he might have done in his past or present life, but one must know that in the same tree of the material body, the individual soul and the supreme soul as paramātmā are sitting like two birds. And that's a Upanishadic reference, right? From the Mundaka Upanishad.
The Bhagavatam is quoting the Upanishad. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, or
right?
Prabhupada is. Well, Prabhupada in his commentary. Right. Yeah. One of them, these two birds sitting in the body, the tree of the body, there's the ātma and then the paramātmā. There's the self and then there's God in this form of paramātmā. One of them, the living being, is enjoying the fruits of the tree. That means we're trying to enjoy this world. Whereas the supreme being is there to witness the activities. Therefore, the paramātmā feature, the supreme soul, is actually the witness of all activities of the living being, and only by his direction can the living being remember or forget what he might have done in the past. He is therefore both the all-pervading impersonal Brahman and the localized paramātmā in everyone's heart. This is speaking of Krishna. He is the knower of all past, present, and future, and nothing can be concealed from him. The devotees know this truth, and therefore this is a great line right here. You ready for a good line?
Yeah, I am.
So this understanding that as I move and journey throughout existence in many different bodies, over the course of time, I am always accompanied by Krishna in the form of paramātmā, who's witnessing all of my activities, aware of them, granting me remembrance, granting me forgetfulness according to my desire, really. So he says, the devotees know this truth, and therefore they discharge their duties. And this is going to the question that you asked. It's the beginning of an answer to the question that you asked. Like, well, what do we do? Do we get all into astrology? Do we get,
Jewels.
or this prize, or if karma is the cause of everything, there's this prize chitta, right?
Worshipping Ganesh.
Do I worship all the different devas or do different rituals to counteract my bad karma? Do I get all caught up in that? So he says, the devotees know this truth. They know that God is with me in my heart at all times, and he's granting knowledge or forgetfulness. The devotees know this truth, and therefore they discharge their duties sincere. They do their dharma, right? They act dharmically, sincerely. Sincerely means without a separate motive. And then he says, without being overly anxious for rewards. Right? I'm not all into astrology because I think I'm going to get some reward out of it. I'm not into getting into the law of karma and ritual so that I can reap some reward from it. I know that God's in my heart all the time. I know that I have a connection with that God. I'm going to do my dharmic duty. That might mean being a good mother, being a good father, being a good husband or wife. It might mean being a good teacher that's not corrupted, speaking the truth. It might be taking care of social justice, making sure that there's justice in this world. It may mean as a business person acting ethically and caring for others through that. It may mean assisting others in all of those different roles. But I'm going to do my duty. The devotees know this truth, and therefore they discharge their duty sincerely without being overly anxious for rewards. The only reward that they really want is deeper truth, or say deeper devotion, right? So he says, now, besides that, one cannot estimate the Lord's reactions. In other words, let me do my duty. Let me not be too concerned with material rewards. And then besides that, he says, besides that, one cannot estimate the Lord's reactions, why this happened or why that happened. It's a little too subtle for us to understand exactly this happened because of that. Why are you suffering? Because of. Besides that, one cannot estimate the Lord's reactions either by speculation or by scholarship. Why does he put some into difficulty and not others? He is the supreme knower of the Vedic knowledge, and thus he is the factual Vedantist. This is going back to that verse 15:15, right? At the same time, he is the compiler of Vedanta. No one is independent of him, and everyone is engaged in his service in different ways. Really? Everybody's engaged in God's service?
Everybody.
In the conditions.
And sometimes it means going down a very dark path.
Okay. In the conditions.
For lifetimes. Okay. For lifetimes, right?
But let's just hold on one second. He says, no one is independent of him, and everyone is engaged in his service in different ways. In the conditioned state, such services are rendered by the living being under the force of material nature, whereas in the liberated state, the living being is helped by the spiritual nature in the voluntary loving service of the Lord. So let's look, like if we go back to this question of like, why am I suffering? And one might say it's because of that person that I'm suffering. They did this to me.
Yeah.
They are the agent of my suffering. But then someone may go deeper. No, it's more nuanced. Let's go underneath the superficial level, and let's understand that previously I performed activities. There's a law of karma that's in effect. And so if I'm suffering, I have the faith that it's because of something that I've done in the past that's coming back to me. So do I blame the agent? And if that's the case, then that agent that caused my suffering is actually, as being stated here, engaged in service, right? They're actually carrying out the will of God, even though they have no intention to. So you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like I'm becoming the agent of someone else's karma. It's not that I'm intending to serve God's plan, but actually I am. So he says, no one is independent of him, and everyone is engaged in his service in different ways. In the conditioned state, in the ignorant state, in the forgetful state. In the conditioned state, such services are rendered by the living being under the force of material nature. I'm being called to act in a certain way and do a certain thing, and I'm interacting with another being, and I'm carrying out the law of karma. But he says, whereas in the liberated state, the living being is being helped by the spiritual nature. And not the material energy, but the spiritual energy is beginning to reveal deeper truths to them. And in the voluntary loving service of the Lord, I've turned my desire back. I'm not concerned with material rewards. I've turned my desire back to reconnecting voluntarily. And now I'm under the different energy of the Lord, that spiritual nature. And then Prabhupada says, yeah, go ahead. Prabhupada says, there is no incongruity or inebriety in his actions. So in other words, we look at this world and we say, oh, it's screwed. There's some incongruity here. God's supposed to be the God of love, but then there's so much pain. You know, why is he allowing this to happen? Why is he allowing that to happen? And by saying there is no incongruity or inebriety, it's saying that it's all working perfectly. You know, why does we look at the prison house and we don't say, oh, that's necessarily, if prisons actually were like, theoretically, the prison
Theoretical prison house, yes.
Yeah, theoretically, the prison is a place for reform, so it's a good thing. And we don't look at that and say, why is the state so cruel that they create a prison? No, it's it's meant for reform. Why is there suffering in this world? Is meant for reform. Now, Prabhupada goes on, he says, the conclusion is therefore that the sufferings of the representative of religion, in this case, Dharma in the form of the bull, and the representative of the earth, which is the cow, the conclusion is therefore that the sufferings of the representative of religion and the representative of the earth, as present before Maharaj Pariksit, were planned to prove that Maharaj Pariksit was the ideal executive head because he knew well how to give protection to the cows, the earth, and the brahmanas, dharma, religious principles, the two pillars of spiritual advancement, right? Protecting the earth, protecting dharma, those are pillars. They facilitate, like pillars hold something up. If those are in place in society, caring for the earth, caring for dharma, then spiritual advancement will rest on those pillars. Everyone is under the full control of the Lord. He is quite correct in his action when he desires something to be done by someone, irrespective of the consideration of the particular case. And finally, Maharaj Pariksit was thus put to the test of his greatness. Dharma turned to him and said, you tell me. Now let us see how he solves it by his sagacious. Is that how you pronounce it? Sagacious mind.
Mara says yes. She's been to school.
Thank you, Mara.
Studied this.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and read text 21.
21. Sutta Goswami said. So Sutta Goswami is the narrator here. O best among the Brahmins, Emperor Pariksit, thus hearing the personality of religion speak, he was fully satisfied, and without mistake or regret, he gave his reply. The king said.
Let's go ahead and read that commentary.
Okay.
It's a short one, but I think it's interesting. The statement of the bull, the personality of religion or dharma, was full of philosophy and knowledge. And the king was satisfied, since he could understand that the suffering bull was not an ordinary one. Right? We need to become like that, not like ordinary people, but we need to become deeper people, right? People that can see not only the superficial external level, but that we can interpret the events in our lives, the sufferings in our lives, the pain that we go through, that we can interpret it in a deeper way and find spiritual truths in it. And those can become the impetus for our further spiritual development. So he says he was satisfied with the bull's, what a good answer. I would have, in one sense, I was waiting for you just to tell me who's the cause of your suffering, and I was going to deal with it on the level of justice. But you took it to a deeper level. And so I'm very satisfied with that answer. And he understood that the suffering bull was not an ordinary one. And then Prabhupada says, unless one is perfectly conversant with the law of the Supreme Lord, one cannot speak such things touching philosophical truths, right? We have to kind of absorb ourselves in these sacred texts again and again, right? Not just hear them like commonly is done in religious institutions. You know, if it's one day a week, I go to my, place of worship. Someone gives a talk. I went there, so I'm good. And I walk out of there and I don't think about it again until next week. All right. But this hearing process is one of like, it's daily. It's actually even, minute to minute, that one is contemplating the truths that they hear in the sacred text. So unless one is perfectly conversant, and that happens through repetition and contemplation and inquiry, unless one is perfectly conversant with the law of the spiritual Lord, one cannot speak such things touching philosophical truths. The emperor, being also on an equal level of sagacity, right? Can we look that word up, sagacity? Does it have to do with sage, with the word sage?
Yeah.
But we don't say sagacity, we say sagacity.
The quality
hard
of being
G.
sagacious.
And sagacious means?
Of a sage.
Having or showing keen mental discernment and good judgment, or shrewd.
Yeah, so it's all related to the word sage, right? So the emperor, being also on an equal level of sagacity, replied to the point without doubts or mistakes. So tomorrow we have a great verse and a great purport that I think we need to read at length. So why don't we cue it up right now? You got it? You ready? I'm gonna cut you off guard.
It's 58. You caught me off guard.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just really want to. We could read the verse. Why don't we read the verse and then we'll read the verse and purport tomorrow.
All right, let's do that.
So this is the response. Raja Uvacha. The king said, "O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of dharma, of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for." Oh, this is a mind-blowing verse, and on surface level, it sounds like, what? Are you kidding me? But there's really something deep to think about here, okay? The king said, "Oh, you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principles that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personification of dharma, of religion." That sounds crazy, doesn't it? That one who points out the perpetrators is, I mean, it sounds kind of like the Italian neighborhood, right?
What's that?
Sounds like kind of like the mood, and like you were talking about your mother. Hey, you never go to the cops, right?
Never go.
That one who points out the perpetrator is as bad as the perpetrator, right? But it's not that. It's much deeper spiritual than that, and we will talk about that tomorrow.
My mother has a deep wisdom.
She has a deep street. It's called street wisdom.
Street. How'd you do yesterday with blaming, complaining, and criticizing, Vera?
Oh yeah.
Because you're like,
Good, it's hard.
yeah, I know. This whole thing is hard. Anyway, I'd like to dig up this how much of these Vedic arts to counteract bad things, ill health, because I've had a shift.
Yeah.
I've had a shift in this. We can talk about that tomorrow too.
Let's do that.
In this last year alone, I think, yeah, actually some of these arts, because it's all intention bound. Like if you're thinking, I want better health so I can do better service. If I want, sometimes there's an agenda I have, and that's not God's agenda. That's different. And then I try to like metaphysically bargain with the gods. No, this is different. If you have your strong intentions to worship and serve in that regard, then I think it's good.
Okay.
But anyway, these are good ideas. Thanks everybody for joining us. What a day. What a great day today it's going to be. I can just feel it. I'm excited for teacher training. I'm excited for Q&A day. If you have questions on your spiritual journey, please write them to wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com, because Saturday is Q&A day and Sunday is interview day. So lots of stuff coming up on our Patreon. I'm very impressed. Our Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is getting quite impressive. We have both live classes, workshops happening practically all week long, as well as archived classes on yoga, kirtan, Ayurveda, Sanskrit, and meditation. Then we've got our Bhakti 12-step recovery group, an ongoing Discord thread where people are sharing recipes, book clubs, questions and answers. It's a beautiful thing going on here. If you like to Support us. It's a community-supported podcast. You just go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages. This is our thing. We did this as a morning class. It took an hour. Now it's taken all day long. And we like it. We get to think about the Bhagavatam all day long. Thanks for
Hey,
joining
and
us.
Raghu, what's going on Patreon tonight?
On tonight is Sweet Baby Krishna. I haven't given a class in a long time on Sweet Baby Krishna, so please join us. We tell Krishna stories. And then I tell some story off the top of my head about Krishna, and then we chant some mantras and slokas and stutis and stotrams.
What time is that?
That's going to be at 6 p.m. tonight. Sweet Baby Krishna. Please join us on Patreon for that.